Our next item is 7.2, a delegation from Sina Munasinghe, President of the Sri Lanka Canada Association of Brampton, regarding a peace monument for all Sri Lankans. Welcome, Sina. You have 5 minutes.
Sina, you can unmute your mic and address the committee.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, His Worship Mayor Patrick Brown and the members of the Council. I thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. I timed the presentation to be just over 6.5 minutes. I hope that's okay with you. And first, I want to thank Mayor and Councillors for the actions taken to counter COVID. And like everyone else, I'm also looking forward to the day that we can start the normal life we all used to.
Sorry, Sina, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You do have a maximum of 5 minutes for this presentation.
Okay. My name is Sena Munasinghe. I'm the President of Sri Lanka Canada Association of Brampton. We are a community organization for Bramptonians of Sri Lankan origin. I'm here to voice the Sri Lankan community's concern about the motion passed by the City Council to support the erecting of a monument to recognize the contribution made by the Sri Lankan Tamil community to Brampton. Next slide, please. Sri Lankan community in Brampton consists of Sinhalese, Muslims, Tamils, Burghers, and Malays. We are all Sri Lankans. We all have contributed to the culture and the economic prosperity of the city. The armed conflict in Sri Lanka has impacted all of us the same way, irrelevant of our race, religion, or any other difference. We migrated to live peacefully, not to import foreign conflicts of yesterday. We are here to promote coexistence, reconciliation, and harmony in the beautiful flower city of Brampton. Next slide, please. I'd like to read the quote directly from Brampton's 2040 vision. The essence of Brampton is diversity, seen and celebrated as a mosaic of people. Next slide, please. I'd like to highlight a few key points of Brampton's diversity. City of Brampton has 4th largest visible minority population. There's 234 ethnic origins and speaks 89 languages. 52.5% population are born outside Canada. Next slide, please. Here you can see the top 10 places of birth for immigrants, and Sri Lanka is in top 10 places with 11,900 living in Brampton. It is on record that there's 4,660 Tamils, so that leaves around 7,300 approximately Sri Lankans and Muslims living in Brampton. Next slide, please. I skipped this slide because it is just a record. So next slide, please. So this is the armed conflict in Sri Lanka. All ethnic groups, Tamils, Sinhalese, Muslims, were equally affected by the 3 decades of conflict. And the armed conflict brought trauma and destructions to all, Tamils, Sinhalese, Muslims, and other minority groups all over Sri Lanka. LTTE terrorists has massacred 126,000 innocent Sinhalese and Muslim civilians as part of ethnic cleansing. Additionally, 81,000 Sinhalese and Muslims died as results of LTTE terrorist suicide bomb attacks. Tens of thousands of innocent Tamil civilians also died during the armed conflict. Next slide, please. As Sri Lankans, we mourn all loss of lives from this unfortunate conflict. Constructing a monument for only one ethnic group is not reflecting the City of Brampton Vision 2040, leaving the mosaic. It brings back trauma to the Sinhalese and Muslims who have experienced 3 decades of suffering, along with their Tamil brethren. As you know, Brampton is a shining symbol of Canadian cultural mosaic and peace, where all ethnic groups are living peacefully while enjoying their cultures. So let's keep it that way. Next slide, please. So this slide tells it all. It's inclusivity. We are stronger together. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Can you put on the next slide? SLCAB requests to build a peace monument inclusive of all ethnic groups from Sri Lanka, Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims and others affected by armed conflict who have made Brampton as their home and who also made significant contributions to the city of Brampton's growth in the areas of business, arts and culture. Next slide, please.
Sina, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. SLCAB requests the City of Brampton to work with Sri Lanka Canada Association of Brampton and other community organizations to locate a sufficient large park or facility, including consideration of inclusive park if feasible, to construct a peace monument to recognize the end of armed conflict on May 18, 2009 and the dawn of peace in Sri Lanka. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is a rare moment in Brampton's history to bring a lasting peace upon the Sri Lankan community living in Brampton. If you take the right steps toward peace and harmony today, I am sure it will be leadership by example to all communities across the world. I request you to take that action with conviction and pride. With your support, we can unite the community in Brampton and not divide. On behalf of Sri Lankans living in Brampton, I thank you for your time. I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sina. I have questions from Councillor Medeiros, Mayor Brown, and Councillor Singh. Councillor Medeiros, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I do understand after a delegation that we should be limited to questions. And certainly I want to say thank you for your presentation. I guess then in the form of a question, I do appreciate what you've said. I do appreciate your delegation. Just as a reminder as well, and maybe I'm not sure, I don't want you to comment as well, but if we think about the fact that not only this council, but up to the Canadian Prime Minister, parliamentarians from the federal government, provincial government, they've all condemned what happened at Jaffna and with the destruction of the Tamil genocide monument. There's numerous UN reports, very startling reports, who speak to human rights violations and the policies and practices in place. And this is from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and that is very concerning as well. And just lastly, I would just say that, as you know, the City of Brampton, you rightfully suggested, in terms of what we represent here in the City of Brampton, our effort of building the Tamil Monument is not about creating division. It's really about letting people heal their wounds. It's about building a better society. It's a strong message that authoritarian regimes and their supporters, in terms of strengthening Canada's efforts towards protesting human rights, and we do that right here in the City of Brampton. And we will always speak up, I think, against these forms of tyranny specifically. And the most important aspect of this was that truly this really impacted our local Brampton Tamil community in such a way that I was moved, and I think this council was very moved as well, knowing what the pain and suffering they went through. So again, this is not about creating division, it's about respect and support for a community that clearly feels the pain of what's happened over and beyond in another country. So I do appreciate your presentation, your delegation, and certainly everyone who lives in the City of Brampton has an opportunity to come to council and provide us with any forms of consideration that is important to the community. And that's what this council represents, and we will always respect diversity and inclusion. So well, I thank you very much for your delegation. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a few seconds to answer that. First of all, that monument was actually not destroyed. It is has to be demolished because it is as part of the expansion plans, and now it is being again reconstructed as a peace monument. So it is being again will be a symbol of peace. And other allegations against Sri Lanka has been addressed at the appropriate forums, so I'm not going to go there. And I am more than happy to meet Mr. Medeiros to explain the facts about Sri Lanka. Then he can decide for himself.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros and Sina. Mayor Brown, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Santos. I read the letter from Sina. Sina, are you a Brampton resident?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And how long has the Sri Lankan Canadian Association of Brampton been around for?
We have not been functioning as a Brampton association for long, but
Okay,
we have been.
because this is the first time I've heard of it.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
Sina, how many members do you have of the Sri Lankan Canadian Association of Brampton?
Okay. Right now, we are having about 500 members, but because we are very young, we are still expanding. So we will be getting more members, but at the moment we don't have that much.
Okay, now Sina, I'm reading your letter. It uses the same language as a letter that I got recently from the Sri Lankan High Commission. Do you work with the Sri Lankan? Do you have a collaborative relationship with the Sri Lankan High Commission?
Not at all. Would you mind reading whatever that text you see that it is from whatever that letter you received from Sri Lankan High Commission that is in my delegation?
No, it's the same stats you're using, the same information as the Sri Lankan High Commission. I just wondered, have you spoken to the Sri Lankan High Commission? Do they agree with your letter?
I have no reason to contact Sri Lankan High Commission on this. I am representing here as a citizen of Brampton, a Canadian citizen living in Brampton.
But have you spoken to the Sri Lankan High Commission?
I have not. I have not spoken to any Sri Lankan authority on this regard.
Okay. You mentioned some stats about 4,000 Tamils living in Brampton. According to Stats Canada, 12,000 people in Brampton have their mother tongue as Tamil. What was the reason for not using Stats Canada and ignoring that number?
Well, that 4,600 number is in the original motion moved by Councillor Medeiros, so I went by that. And just to enlighten you, Tamil is a language, and Tamils are spread all over the world. Tamil is a language spoken in many parts of the world. The majority of Tamils living in Tamil Nadu, in India, and then there are many Tamils migrated from Tamil Nadu here who speak Tamil as their mother tongue. And other than that, there are countries like Malaysia, and actually there are many countries where there are Tamils who had been migrated over.
Okay, and Sina, in 2013, Canada boycotted the Commonwealth in Sri Lanka because of the war crimes that were committed. It was a notable boycott at the time. Did you support the boycott, the Canadian boycott of the Commonwealth in Sri Lanka because of the war crimes?
There is there is allegations of war crimes which has been addressed in the appropriate forums, so I don't want to go there. But
but given that the Canadian government took a principled stand, are you in opposition to Canada's foreign policy?
I have no reason to be against Canada's foreign policy. I am a Canadian citizen, and I fully support my government.
Okay, so you support the decision to boycott the Commonwealth in Sri Lanka and the war crimes?
I do.
Okay, thank you. And that's important, because understanding that a genocide took place and war crimes took place is the first step.
Mayor Brown, you are mixing up two things. The allegation is about war crimes, not about genocide at that time.
Okay, so the Canadian government has also expressed their opposition to the genocide that happened. Do you support that Canadian foreign policy position?
Canadian government has not expressly said that genocide happened. What they have done is they have asked the UN to conduct an investigation on that. Now you can see the stark difference between how they done the declaration recently, where they categorically mentioned that, but on the Sri Lankan context, they wanted UN to conduct an investigation.
So both Prime Minister Harper and Prime Minister Trudeau have spoken about the genocide in Sri Lanka. Do you support that principled Canadian foreign policy that just like we have with the Holocaust, just like we have in Serbia, just like we have in Rwanda, that Canada foreign policy involves speaking out against atrocities? Do you support that fundamental Canadian foreign policy?
Absolutely. I am always against any form of violence.
I just want to move on to another issue. one of the reasons I really supported Councillor Medeiros, who showed real leadership in putting this forward, is I believe that cities should be consistent with principled Canadian foreign policy. And one of our part of our family is grieving, we all show in that grief. And it's not about numbers. If there was one Tamil speaking person, or 4,000 as you say, or 12,000 as Stats Canada say, I used to represent Barrie at the time. And I spoke about the genocide in the House of Commons at a time when I had 2 families in Barrie. And people said, oh, you must just be responding to a big Tamil community in your riding. I said, I have 2. And he said, 200,000? I said, no, 2. Because principle is what should be at the heart of Canadian foreign policy, not numbers. And to say that there's less than there is, for really me, is irrelevant. It's about showing solidarity when there's been a major international crime. And so one of the reasons I would oppose changing a genocide memorial to a peace monument is, could you imagine after the Second World War, when around the world Holocaust memorials were built, that if we said that we didn't want to have a Holocaust memorial, that we didn't want to offend the Nazi government, that we would have a peace memorial instead of a Holocaust memorial? People would have been aghast, and rightly so. You can't sweep wrongs under the carpet. You can't ignore the travesty that happened. And part of reconciliation, part of reconciliation is acknowledging the loss of life, the murder, the rape, the mass graves. And that's part of reconciliation. So my first question, Sina, is, would you, following this, would you suggest that it's not appropriate to have a Holocaust memorial?
I think you are making an insinuation there, because Holocaust is an established fact, and it is nothing to do with what's going on in Sri Lanka. And to have that memorial to represent everybody, the grief of Tamil is as the grief of Sinhalese, grief of a Muslim. Anybody who has gone through that conflict knows that. It doesn't go by any nationality.
So, Sina, you don't appear to be aware of Canadian foreign policy and the UN investigations. This is not a matter of debate if a genocide happened, just like it was proven that a genocide happened in Serbia, just like a genocide happened in Rwanda, just like a genocide happened in Nazi Germany. To say the sky is not blue, to say that to pretend something's not happening, I actually think it amplifies the hurt that's happening. To say to the 70,000 plus civilians that were murdered and raped that didn't happen, what you're doing is you're bringing hurt from abroad here. And so I take great offense to this suggestion, because we don't engage in revisionist history in Canada. In Canada, people have come from all around the world in the hope of freedom, in the hope of peace. And to say that their history, which is interwoven with Canadian history, doesn't exist is a slap in the face at their loss. And it's something that I can't abide by or support. And, we have a democracy here, and you're allowed to come forward and to oppose a motion that we've made. But I want you to think about those same Tamil families that tried to come forward in Sri Lanka during the genocide. When they came forward to object to a government action, they were murdered. That's the difference between Canada and a dictatorship. That's the difference between Canada and a genocide. I will not be supporting this request. And I just want to close by saying there have been examples articulated in the Canadian House of Commons about foreign interference. I am worried that this type of revisionist history is being encouraged by the Sri Lankan High Commission. And even though there's been assurances otherwise, I am doubtful, because just like we wouldn't stand by Holocaust denial, we shouldn't stand behind genocide denial. And I just think that needs to be on our record, because this is a democracy. We allow deputations to come forward, but this would not have been allowed during the civil war in Sri Lanka. If this same delegation came forward, the family would have been murdered and raped. Thank you.
We are not actually asking that monument to be.
Point of order.
We are asking
Thank
for
you.
another monument for you.
Yes, Councillor Paleshi, go ahead.
Yeah, this is not a debate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Yep, moving on. Next question is Councillor Singh.
Thank you, and I do have some questions I want to pick up from Mayor Brown. He asked some similar lining of questions, but I know the mayor asked if Sena, you work or affiliated with the Sri Lankan High Commission, but was there any communication between the High Commission?
I have already answered that question. I have not contacted any Sri Lankan authority in that regard.
And your membership, including your membership.
Well, the membership, if they have contacted the High Commission, I can't say for 100% certainty, but for this presentation, there is no relevance with no association with Sri Lankan government.
Okay. Well, I do have similar concerns about obviously the contents of the letters and the similarities, but I just will wrap up. Well, the mayor covered a lot of my points, but you know, this is consistent with foreign policy, as you know, I brought up in council too, as somebody who has members who've survived a genocide, and I know the trauma it causes, and this, you know, monuments and other recognition tools do help with the healing and reconciliation process, especially when a family has faced missing loved ones, physical abuse, sexual assaults. From personal experience, I know the value of having these type of monuments so that, you know, they're not, you know, evaporated in the dust, that those memories are held and families can attend and memorialize those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. So I see that recorded vote, I guess, has been requested to receive the delegation, and I'll move that as well. Thank you.
Yes, I think I would like to add one thing. We are not asking for this monument to be changed. We are asking for another monument for the Sri Lankans who are perished in this conflict, including Tamils.
Thank you, Councillor Singh and Sina, for the delegation. The only motion on the floor at the moment is for receipt of the delegation. That motion is moved by Councillor Medeiros to receive the delegation. There is a recorded vote also being called. Mr. Clerk?
Can I ask a procedural question?
Is that a point of order, Mr. Mayor?
Point of order.
Yes.
To the clerk, if council objects to the content of the delegation, if we vote not to accept the delegation, does that delegation, what happens? Is it removed from the record, or is it just noted that council did not accept the delegation?
Through you, Madam Chair, if a motion is placed and voted on just to receive the delegation, it's just receiving and acknowledging that delegation occurred. It's not taking any action. It's not giving any credence to the information. It's just thanking the delegation for coming and noting it on the public record. There is nothing being struck from the public record.
But what happens if we don't receive the delegation?
There really are only two choices for a delegation for which there's no staff report. It can be received or it can be referred to staff. So that would be another option should committee wish to go there. Otherwise, nothing would happen and we would move on if it doesn't carry. There is no action to follow up.
Okay, so if it's not received, we just move on in the agenda.
That would be correct, because unless another member has another motion to move on this item, which could be introduced if a motion for receipt fails, but we'll cross that bridge if we come to it.
Any further questions on your point of order, Mr. Mayor?
No, I was just thinking of what would be the best approach, since I believe many of us object to the content of the presentation, but it sounds like from the clerk it doesn't really matter in terms of this procedural aspect.
And again, just for clarification to my colleagues, that this is a motion just to receive the delegation. There has been a recorded vote been called, and so I turn this over to the clerk.
Members of committee, please indicate your approval or opposition to the receipt motion. Councillor Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Willens,
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi,
Yes.
Councillor Bowman,
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros,
Yes.
Councillor Williams,
Yes.
Councillor Fortini,
Yes.
Councillor Singh,
Yes.
Councillor Dillon, Councillor Dillon, we'll come back to Councillor Dillon. Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Chair Santos.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, the motion to receive the delegation carries unanimously 11-0.
Thank you again. And then just to be clear, that was for just receipt and acknowledgement that the delegation had occurred this morning.